What is up, everybody? Welcome back to Water Cooler Talk. My name is Caleb Turner, and I'm a sports writer at KSL.com. It's February 16th, 2025, and we are joined once again by Jackson Payne from Deseret News. How you doing tonight, Jackson?
Dude, am I just like a regular co-host now? Like I think this is three straight weeks, four or five. Like this is a nice new Sunday night tradition for us.
It's fun. It's fun. I think we're enjoying it. I think that hopefully the listeners are enjoying it, and it's worked out the last couple of weeks because like we've been. I mean, this week especially, we were at like a lot of the same stuff. So
Yeah.
that's actually what we'll start with. We talked about it last week on the podcast that you were going to be covering the Jazz game against the Lakers with Luka Doncic. And then, like literally minutes after we stopped recording, I got a message from my boss, Josh Furlong, saying, "Hey, we actually need you to sub in as well for our guy Ryan Miller, who was taking a bit of leave before the All-Star break." And so both of us got to go Wednesday night. No place I'd rather be on a Wednesday night than the Delta Center, right? Checking out Utah Jazz versus Los Angeles Lakers. And the miracle of it all, probably, I would say, is that both LeBron and Luka Doncic played a game in Salt Lake City in February with against the Jazz team that like has won two games. So
Yeah.
wild stuff though from there. And it was like the order of things that happened. So like the Jazz lose in LA to the Lakers on Monday, beat them here in Salt Lake on Wednesday, and then the very next day lose to the Los Angeles Clippers. So kind of a very up and down week for the Jazz. But we got to be there for like the big highlight of the week, I guess. Unless you want to tank every single game, which I know a lot of fans do. But you got to win a couple here and there. You got to kind of give the fans a little breadcrumb, a little taste of the future. I think we
Yeah.
saw that Wednesday night. Just overall takeaways from being there in person, checking out that game.
I think you touched on it, right? It's a miracle that LeBron and Luca played together in Utah, especially with that being their last game before the All-Star break. And I feel like on paper it makes sense, right? Like you got to get those two on the same page. You don't want to waste any opportunities to get them clicking before they're playing really meaningful games. And I feel like the Jazz are kind of a unique team to play against, especially twice, because if it's like playing a playoff series where you're playing the same opponent, and that's why you get Lucas to win playoff series. So, but like you said, like I mean, if you're a pro tank guy like I am, you could probably be a little bit disappointed about winning this week, but at the same time, like your young core needs to have these building block wins. We've talked about it with the hockey team a bunch when they beat the Caps last week. That was so big for their young guys and kind of building a brand and a culture within the fan base. And I feel like when you can beat LeBron and Luca in your own house with your young guys, that's a big deal, right? And not only did they beat them, they waxed them. That was an awesome, like emphatic victory for the Jazz. Keontae and Collier were both awesome. Walker Kessler had probably his best game of the season. You saw kind of a glimpse of what the Jazz can be. And what I took away from that game is, the Jazz haven't looked great this year, but maybe they're not as far away as we think they are. Because if they get some good lottery luck and they get an Ace Bailey or a Cooper Flag, maybe the Jazz are ready to sneak into a play-in spot next year. I don't know if that's the path they're going to want to take, but like I like kind of the guard by committee group that they have with Keontae and with Collier. And honestly, if you hold on to Sexton, I think he's really underrated. I think Markkanen helps you a lot. I think Kessler is a really solid big that has a high ceiling. If you add another top five pick into that mix and he becomes an all-star immediately, like that's a really solid core to work with. So I think the future is bright for the Jazz, obviously. I mean, I don't understand what Danny Ainge is doing half the time, but like I have to at least trust it because he's built a winner before. He's built two winners because I think he deserves some credit for the last Celtics championship for basically building that roster. But yeah, I mean, it was just really impressive. I wrote a sidebar about Walker Kessler and how awesome his game was. Um, George and Collier are both awesome. I love the young guards and I love what Kessler has done in year three because last year was kind of disappointing. He's taken that step up this year. I mean, it's just awesome. Anytime you can beat the Lakers, anytime you can beat LeBron and give the fans something, like by the end of the season, that might be one of the biggest highlights of the season, right? Like they beat LeBron and Luca in their own building, in your own building, right? Like there are a bunch of Laker fans there, a bunch of Bronny jerseys. It was probably felt good to be a Jazz fan and shell out a bunch of money for that game and then to send those guys home. So yeah, just really, really awesome experience to be there and had a blast with you, of course. But yeah, good stuff for the Jazz.
Yeah, I was gonna touch on the whole like Lakers fans thing too. There were so many there, and like to be fair, like it was a fun environment
Yeah,
because like it was packed, and like even if it was like maybe 60-40 Lakers fans or whatever it was. Like at least the noise level and like the excitement was there. Because I had the experience of going the very next night, back to back. They play the Clippers the very next night, and like in my opinion, like I'll admit that like I'm a pretty hardcore NBA fan, but like the Clippers are a really good team. Like they have
Yep.
James Harden, like top five player of the last 15 years, arguably, and like they're in a playoff spot. Obviously they don't have like the name and the brand of the Lakers, and this is probably like an extension of I'm sure how everybody in LA feels, which is like
Yeah.
the Clippers will never be the Lakers, right?
They're the steps forward.
But it was like such a night and day difference between those two games. Like it was probably like honestly, I think it was maybe like half capacity at the Delta Center, maybe two-thirds in that Thursday game against the Clippers. And like the energy was super low. And then honestly, the biggest difference was what you just mentioned was Kessler, Walker Kessler. He had a great game on Wednesday against a Lakers team that had just traded away Anthony Davis, so they didn't have like a dominant big. They had the trade rescinded, so they didn't have I'm forgetting his name right now, but the guy coming over from Charlotte didn't have him either.
Oh, William.
Um, yeah, Mark Williams exactly. And then and so he kind of like had his way, and then Markkinen as well kind of had his way in the paint. I think they led by like 20 or 30 points in the paint in the end. And it was the opposite on Thursday when they didn't have Walker Kessler, which is funny. Like the whole like rest injury situation with this Jazz team has been like pretty
So
much
weird.
it's like the only reason that they've really lost games is like they haven't ever been totally healthy in quotes. I'll add because obviously
Available.
exactly they haven't had the availability. And like Colin Sexton didn't play in either game that was at home this week. And so to not have Kessler, not have Sexton, you go out there and like they kind of got torched by another really good big man on the other side in Zubats from the Clippers, and then James
Mhm.
Harden and Norman Powell just kind of went to town with the inside out game. And so like that was the big difference that I noticed but in those two. So I'm very interested to see like what happens. I mean, we've seen basically what this Jazz team can do when they're fully healthy. We saw it like those first few weeks of Will Hardy's head coaching tenure when they won it was like something like 10 of 13 or something to
They were the
start.
one seed. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah, and so like I think that's honestly a taste of like what they could be if they can just put everything together and just like admit, okay, like what if we just go for it? They could be a play-in team, like you're saying, if they kind of
Yeah.
get everybody on the court. But as Danny Ainge has said, as Justin Zanuck has said, they don't want to be a play-in team. They want to compete for championships, and that requires kind of like that next level of sacrifice, next level of investment into a guy like Cooper Flag, like you're mentioning. So, needless to say, the Jazz end up going 1-2 on this week. They still, they're losing more games than they're winning. So that's what you want if you're tanking. And they're still in a spot to get like a top three pick in the draft. So even after all that, still on track for tanking.
And one other takeaway I had from that Laker game we went to was I know who knows how far away the Jazz still are from being a legit contender, but like the Lakers are interesting because it feels like they're a regional rival of the Jazz just because there are so many Laker fans in Utah, especially. I mean, there's Laker fans everywhere because there's Duke fans everywhere, there's Cowboy fans everywhere, Yankee fans everywhere.
Yeah, yeah.
There's Laker fans everywhere, but they're especially in Utah for some reason. And so I feel like the Lakers have always kind of been this regional rival for the Jazz. And now that you have Luka in LA, like the Lakers are always going to be relevant. They're always going to be in the playoff hunt. And so I feel like once the Jazz get it together, that's going to be a really fun rivalry in the West, the Lakers versus the Jazz, because it's kind of I mean, Salt Lake has all the I mean, LA has all the flash and the stars.
No nightlife.
No nightlife, right? And Salt Lake obviously doesn't have the nightlife. It's kind of a more niche city, and the Jazz have always been kind of a team by committee type organization. Like they,
I don't want to hear you slandering City Creek Mall like that ever again or the
hey,
Gateway.
we got a Popeyes now at City Creek. We're back.
Hey.
So cool throwing Salt Lake, you know. But that's the thing. I feel like the Lakers and Jazz have always kind of had it out for each other, but I feel like you're going to get another installment of that rivalry in the next few years once Luka really takes over, especially once LeBron retires and the Lakers become kind of a sexier team. Because like I mean, LeBron's there, but everyone likes to hate LeBron. I feel like when Luka takes over the Lakers, it's going to change their identity a bit, and the Jazz will be better, and they're going to have some awesome battles in the playoffs, hopefully. And so that'll be really fun. I feel like Wednesday gave us a nice taste of that going forward.
I think Nico Harrison just heard you use sexy and Luca in the same sentence, and he's on his way to give you Kyrie Irving right now. So yeah, we'll and people forget this too that Luca and the Mavericks in general, but mostly Luca and Jalen Brunson actually essentially ended the Donovan Mitchell of Rudy
Oh yeah.
Gobert era, like with that first round playoff loss. So. Like it's understandable, like kind of like you're saying, like there should be some feelings from Jazz fans toward Luka Doncic.
And Luka's torched them historically. He's averaging almost
Yeah.
a triple double against them. Like I know we talked, like I saw Luka like his very first week in the NBA playing in Salt Lake, and he was just awesome. And that stupid Maverick series too. Like, I mean, it's just it's gonna be an awesome rivalry, I'm telling you. Like the way like I feel like the Jazz, if they go on this, if the Jazz become the OKC team that they want
Mm,
to be,
yeah.
kind of have a lot of like no superstar. I mean, like Shea's a superstar, but like he's like a B tier. He's not like a Tatum or Giannis, but he has a lot of help. It's kind of like a committee team, and they're from a smaller market, and it's just they did it the right way. They grow their guys in house, and then they can take on the Clippers and the Lakers and the Warriors and all these West Coast teams from bigger markets that have deeper pockets, right? And so I feel like it's going to be so fun. And the Luca aspect, I hadn't even considered that with the playoffs. I mean, I just thought Luca being in LA is one thing, but I've tried to block out that playoff series from my memory because that was such a bummer, man.
Yeah.
That's oh, dude, don't now in a bad mood. That's the worst.
I'm sure you're not the only one. It seems based on the comments that I've seen in basically every Jazz article on our website this year, every Jazz fan is in a bad mood just perpetually. So,
I'm having a
um,
very bad day.
literally. So yeah, that's basically it for the Jazz as far as recap goes. But next up, just in our recap of this week, we got to talk about a little college hoops because it was a big Saturday, literally just one day yesterday, where the Big 12 basketball teams here in the state of Utah, just decided they were going to dominate and just like destroy everybody. And so this is what we got: the four Big 12 basketball teams in the state of Utah. BYU women's basketball started out with a win over number 20 Oklahoma State. Then BYU men's basketball, another win in the Marriott Center over Kansas State, who was very high. I think 6 or 7 wins in a row. Utah women's basketball on the road over ASU, and then Utah men's basketball at home at the Huntsman over number 17 Kansas. All that in one day. Um, it was pretty incredible. And I was thinking, if Utah State could have gone on today down to New Mexico in the pit and beaten them, it could have been a nice, 5 for 5. Would have been a different narrative. Instead, the narrative they lost. So the narrative we're going with is Big 12 dominance here in the state of Utah. And you were at the BYU game, I'm assuming,
Yep.
last night. Got to see that against a great Kansas State team. And now that Kansas State team goes and plays against Utah tomorrow. Like really quick turnaround for them. So the state of Kansas, both universities versus the state of Utah is just like really happening right now, I guess.
Yeah, basketball by stock, man. Basketball in Utah has been pretty fun. That Utah, I mean, BYU had an awesome win, and I cover BYU pretty closely, and so I could talk a lot about BYU, but I think the most impressive one is Utah beating Kansas, right? Because
Yeah,
when
it's
was the last time
Kansas.
when was the last time Utah had like an iconic win like that?
Yeah,
And especially like going to the Big 12, they were projected to be terrible. I feel like they've been a lot better than I think a lot of people thought they were going to be. And I said on the pod a few weeks ago, like Utah, for whatever reason, I just feel like they're sneaky okay. Like they could put it together for a few games and somehow end up in like the semifinals in the conference tournament. And I feel like you kind of saw that Utah team against Kansas. Kansas is kind of like, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if BYU beat them just because
right.
Kansas has beaten one tournament team since Thanksgiving. If you look at kind of what they've done, they're not doing great. Hunter Dickinson wasn't great against Utah. Gabe Madsen was awesome. I think if Gabe can kind of be the alpha in these games for Utah down the stretch, especially in the conference tournament, like that's going to be a really interesting team. And I think Craig Smith bought himself some job security yesterday. I mean, much has been said about his tenure and just kind of how disappointing it's been and not living up to expectations. But if you can beat a team like Kansas, what does that do for your belief going forward? And I mean, it would just be so awesome if basketball mattered at Utah again, if people bought in and basketball was just rocking on the hill again, because it's such a cool program when things are going well and when people are interested. And so obviously every time they beat BYU, you go like, oh, maybe this awakens something in Utah, and it just doesn't. But I feel like when you knock off a Kansas, it's a whole different level of maybe getting people involved again. So really liked what I saw from the Utes last night. That was an awesome win.
What's the line from Megamind? The news of my death was greatly exaggerated or whatever.
Yeah, the was that Metro Man at the end?
Yeah. Anyway,
Reports of my death were greatly exaggerated.
yeah, yeah, exactly. The Utes are not dead. You mentioned Gabe Madsen there. Now the all-time 3-point leader at the University of Utah men's basketball program. So anytime you've got a guy like that who can like shoot your way back into a game, you've got a chance. Like you said, like if the cards kind of fall the right way, if his shots are falling, you could end up in a conference semifinal, final game, championship game, whatever it might be. And and like even better, you can beat anybody on any given night because the three pointer is kind of the great equalizer.
Yep.
And there were several weeks over the last little bit where Gabe Madsen was not on from three, and Utah was on the wrong end of it because of that. But when he's on, he made a huge shot last night, and like it was like under 2 minutes to go, and it was the shot that gave him the record. So like great storyline there. Happy for him, happy for the Utes, and it's been like certainly an adjustment I think for them into Big 12 basketball. But this is kind of like the announcement of their like arrival, I would say,
Yep.
because to beat a program like Kansas, who has is as storied as they are, top 20 team, just great stuff there. And as you mentioned, not only Kansas State going to Utah now, but Kansas going to BYU.
Yep.
So that's kind of segueing now into our look ahead for the upcoming week, and we'll start there, I guess. BYU men's basketball double ranked week. You've got number 17 Kansas. Well, as of now, 17. That'll change tomorrow. I'm
Yep.
assuming in Provo on
2024.
right, exactly in Provo on Tuesday, and then what was number 13 Arizona on Saturday. So big week for the Cougars coming up. Yeah, you mentioned you were there for the win over Kansas State, but I guess can they keep it going because they got the road win over West Virginia? Is this kind of a sign of like momentum, things to come, or was those kind of like like you gotta wait and see still?
Yeah, I think BYU is playing their best basketball this season. That West Virginia win was so huge. I've been watching BYU basketball for a long time, as you know. I cannot remember a game where BYU made more clutch shots and came up clutch more than that West Virginia win.
Mm,
Just it felt like there were so many times where somebody hit a shot or someone got a steal or it was such a cool game just from like a clutch perspective. Like BYU doesn't it feels like it's the other way around where somebody torches BYU like that or the other team always gets the breaks. And I'm not trying to like peddle the BYU victim mentality
right,
theory that
right.
everyone loves, but like that's legit how it is typically with BYU. There's always a villain that just kind of like picks BYU apart. And I feel like BYU kind of had a chance to do that to West Virginia. And I mean, Trey Stewart and Mihajlo Boskovic were the heroes of that game. That's so random, right? Like that's like Hunter Erickson being the hero for Utah. That's just
Don't sleep on it though.
no. I'm not sleeping. I'm just saying, like in terms of like where you're
Yeah,
at in rotation, right? Like
yeah.
Hunter Erickson kind of was the hero against BYU for
Right,
Utah.
right.
So like it's just like when you get an unexpected hero and a huge road win, like and a signature win like that, like that's so huge for you. And then BYU had its best first half of the season yesterday against Kansas State. Their defense is light years better than it was. I mean, just earlier this year, it felt like BYU couldn't defend anyone down low and they couldn't get downhill offensively. It was just the paint was just such a weird thing. Like something was off with Kada earlier. Mag wasn't really what they wanted him to be for whatever reason, offensively, something didn't click down low, and just it feels like it's the complete opposite right now. Like they're defending so much better. Their rebounding advantage has been great. Their big men are playing well. Yegor is starting to get hot again. He's not looking to score as much, but he's dishing out these assists that just you watch them and you're like, okay, that's an NBA player, right? Richie Saunders is making a case for all Big 12 first team. It's just they're clicking at the perfect time, and I kind of thought this was going to be the case. It reminded me of like when Mark Pope first took the job at BYU. You have a decent non-conference schedule. You're just kind of like you're not that impressed. It's a little awkward starting in conference play because it's so many new pieces trying to mesh together. And then as the season goes on, things start clicking and you peak at the right time. And I feel like this has kind of been the same with Kevin Young. And I think the biggest takeaway for me yesterday with Kansas State that bodes well going forward for BYU is that BYU made 6 3-pointers
Mm,
against Kansas State, which is one of its lowest totals of the season. They're such a 3-point reliant team. And to only make 6 3-pointers, and one came in like garbage time in the final second, right? And they still scored 80 points. Like they can score the basketball in different ways, even when the 3-pointer isn't working for them. And that's such a big deal in the Big 12 when you're playing good defenses and you're playing in other gyms. Like I think BYU has found a BYU is there's layers to this team. There's layers to their attack and their game plan. So if one thing's not working for them, they're not screwed as they would have been in past games. And so I really like their ability to beat you in different ways now. And so I think that bodes well against the Kansas, which is a really well coached team. They got a lot of experience on that roster, a lot of talent on that roster. But I mean, people are going to be fired up in the Marriott Center. It's one of the most iconic matchups in the history of that venue. BYU's red hot. Kansas is kind of slumping. Like This seems to be an awesome collision course. So I'm really excited to see what goes on, and I do think BYU can keep it going. And I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if BYU lost, but I also wouldn't be shocked if BYU won out and won by 10.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the kind of the Kansas up and down recently. They've basically been a 500 team over the last 2 weeks, like win one, lose one. So certainly, obviously, I mean, I don't think they've lost consecutive games, so that would be a bit of a surprise. I think if they lose at Utah and then lose at BYU, but it's there for the taking basically, and BYU is in a position where they're trying to make a statement. You know, they lost they lost a couple games. They lost the Utah game early on. But now they're kind of inching their way back into that March Madness conversation. They were in that last four out earlier in the week, or last four in, I should say, earlier in the week. So it's definitely there. And I'm just gonna put this out into the universe. I'm just gonna say it. There are a lot of players currently in the NBA that are like Richie Saunders.
Oh, 100%.
Like like you look at a guy like like Peyton Pritchard, you look at Christian Brown on the Nuggets. Honestly, even look at a guy like Grayson Allen, right? Like if you can shoot threes and you can make the hustle plays and like play decent defense, there's a place for you in the NBA. Even on the Celtics again, you got Pritchard and you got Hauser. So like there's definitely a place for that kind of guy. Um, for I'm just gonna say it, white guys in the NBA, right? White Americans in the NBA, which has been a bit of a dying breed over the last 20 years. But like you mentioned, he could get an all conference shout out. Um, and just those glue guys, right? Like you always need a guy that's just like there to like make the play when you need it, and he could be one of those guys.
It's been fun to see his growth now in his third year at BYU because he really was that scrappy hustle
Mm,
glue guy. And now you're getting that along with first team all conference offense.
right.
And he had 14 rebounds yesterday. He had five.
Insane.
Like he's an NBA player, and I
Yeah,
think BYU is really going to have to put the full court press on him, literally, to bring him back next year because he's an RM, he's an older guy. His NBA opportunity is might be limited, and so he's got to think long and hard about coming back to BYU, playing with AJ, and possibly
yeah.
going down as an all-time BYU great, maybe going to a Final Four with AJ, because I've been hearing numbers like he could command $1 million to stay at BYU next year,
Wow. Yeah.
whereas he could go to the NBA, bet on himself, and get a six-figure deal as a two-way or
Right.
lower bench player. Like it's gonna, but those opportunities might not be there if he comes back, gets his bag for BYU and gets hurt. So it's like it's gonna
Yeah.
be really interesting. And then Dallin Hall too. He's playing a lot better
Yeah.
lately. I feel like he was kind of not in the doghouse, but kind of forgotten about. He kind of fell out of favor for Yegor, and they've been putting him and Yegor on the floor at the same time. If if you can keep Dallin Hall in Provo, because who knows what his experience has been. I mean, I would love to see him come back as a fourth year senior point guard at BYU because a team with Dallin Hall at point guard, Richie Saunders on the wing, AJ DeBansa, and then Kaba. I mean, that might be a Final Four team potentially.
It's it's all
That's a
right.
really good team.
It's all right. It's all right.
Like BYU has to keep those guys in Provo next year. But Richie Saunders, I mean, that's going to be that is one of the biggest stories this offseason is keeping him at BYU because I mean, NBA teams might be chomping at the bit to get a guy like that in their building. And I mean, BYU's going to have to pay him a lot of money to stay, and he's earned it. He's been awesome this year. And even if he leaves, he's an all-time great BYU player, but he could really go down as one of like the defining characters in BYU's program history if he stays another year and they go on a tournament run with AJ. But it'll be interesting to see because I mean, I'm a Richie Saunders truther. I love the guy, but I mean, I think his NBA future should take precedent over everything because it's such a limited window. And I mean, look at a guy like Sam Merrill and the success he's had in the league.
Yeah,
And
that's
Richie
another
Saunders could
one.
be that guy, right? Like
Yeah.
he can help teams win. He can be, I mean, like Derek, kind of a different like Derek White is a better player than Richie Saunders will be.
Yeah.
But that glue defensive piece was so big for the Celtics winning that last championship. That's the kind of player Richie Saunders can be. He can be the difference between winning championships and not because
Mm,
he's the dirty work guy, right? Shout out Norm Macdonald. He does the dirty work. He hustles. He's the glue guy. That's so valuable in the NBA, and I can't wait to see what Richie does there.
yeah, definitely several more opportunities just in the next week, couple weeks to make that you know, presence shown. So happy for him. Excited to see what's coming up for them. As far as the rest of the upcoming college basketball slate, BYU women's basketball team looking to rattle off a couple more wins here together at Arizona, then at home against Arizona State. Utah women's basketball currently riding a 7 game win streak. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up ranked tomorrow. We shall see. But look out for that Utah women's basketball team. They're into their final 4 games of the regular season, as most of these teams, I should say, including number 20 Oklahoma State this week for the women running Utes, and then number 18 West Virginia as well. So another double ranked matchup here for the Utes, women Utes. Utah men's basketball, quick turnaround, like I mentioned, with Kansas State coming to the Huntsman on Monday night. Utah State men's basketball, two home game week this week against San Jose State and San Diego State. I felt bad the other day. I was like, should I be including the Utah USU women's basketball team in these recaps as well? And I decided to check out their record. They have 2 wins this
Oh,
year. There's something like 2-18, 2-20, something like that. So
I believe they have a first year coach.
yeah, so not exactly where you want to be from a results standpoint, but you can only go up from here.
Onward and upward, Aggies.
Utah State women's basketball team. So maybe we'll give you guys more shout outs in the future. And lastly, our professional teams here, Utah Jazz back in action after the All-Star break. Keontae George was out in San Francisco with the Rising Stars, and then his team ended up making it into that 4 game All-Star game tournament tonight. They ended up losing to the OGs, which was like the Kevin Durant, Steph Curry group. So no shame there for Keontae George. Made it all the way to Sunday night, so good for him. The Jazz are back Friday, Saturday at the Delta Center against Oklahoma City. So shout out, like you were talking about, the Thunder, and then the Houston Rockets on Saturday, and then Utah Hockey Club back in action Saturday on the road at the Los Angeles Kings. And then a 4 game homestand for them. And that brings us to our winners and losers of the week. Start out with the obvious here. Utah Big 12 teams get a win because they went 4-0 this weekend. But also I want to close with this, just some thoughts on kind of this All-Star break that we've been seeing with both the NHL and the NBA. NHL did it a little different this year. They're doing the Four Nation Face-Off with a bunch of national teams. And then the alternative to that is you've got the NBA All-Star break. And I'm going to give the L to the NBA on this one. This All-Star weekend was just not great, especially tonight's All-Star game. I don't know if you had a chance to catch any of the actual game. Well, it
Oh,
was
yeah.
hard. It was hard to catch any of it because it was like 30 minutes of actual basketball and like 2.5 hours of like commercials and like extra stuff with Kevin Hart. And
No, no more Kevn Hart, please. Let's graduate from the Kevn Hart era because
it
that was
was
horrible.
it was painful. Like it was a really tough watch. And just for, like if you want to just watch basketball, like you just weren't able to. Like there was
No.
so little actual basketball being played, and for all this talk of we're gonna make it more competitive, we're gonna take it back to basics, we're gonna make it more exciting for NBA fans. Well, that was not the way to do it. And the way to do it might be something more like the Four Nation Face-Off,
Yep.
which USA Canada starts off last night with like 2 fights in 9 seconds on the ice, and like you could do a USA players versus international players, or take the top team from each continent, do the best European team, best South American, best Asian team, whatever it might be, bring them together, and kind of have it out that way. But whatever it is, like it's got to be focused more on the game, on the competition, as opposed to all this like extra stuff that's going on, because like frankly we just don't care.
I preferred the tournament format. I liked the Rising Stars aspect because it was
Yeah,
like, I mean, for a team like the Grizzlies to have like Zach Edey out there, to have Keontae George out there for
for
Utah,
sure.
that's cool, man. Like it's kind of like baseball. Like MLB, every team has to have at least one All-Star. So even if your team is atrocious, you still have like a relief pitcher or like an infielder that can play in the game later and possibly have a big impact. And like I grew up an Orioles fan. They were terrible. Adam Jones hit like the game-winning sacrifice fly one year when they were bad. And that was like the coolest part of my summer. It was like, wow, an Oriole, like that's so cool, right? Like, and so I feel happy for those fans that they get to see their guys, get to play in these games that don't often get that recognition. But I mean, the actual basketball itself was pretty horrible. Except I think the Rising Stars, just the effort there was better, just because they were literally like scrapping, trying to like make a name for themselves. I like that the OGs versus the Rising Stars happened because that was kind of a cool
Yeah.
position. But yeah, too much Kevin Hart, too much pomp and circumstance, not enough basketball. The quality of basketball is terrible. Just the NHL dunked on the NBA this weekend.
Yeah.
The Four Nations face-off is awesome. Hockey's having a moment right now. I'm glad that Utah gets to be kind of in the middle of it. I mean, I have some NBA takes that I won't unleash here, but like I look forward to the NBA kind of having to reinvent itself in the next few years. Not like drastically, but like I look forward to a changing of the guard that might make the product a little more bearable in these kind of moments.
Well, and I feel like they're trying too hard.
Yeah.
Like
You don't
like
need you have so many great personalities within the league.
yeah,
Not need Kevin Hart.
yeah.
And Draymond Green should be nowhere near these type of things. I know he plays for the Warriors. It's in San Francisco, but get him out of here.
I need the hat back.
And like you got like Wemby is supposedly the next face of the league.
Yeah.
Why are they pulling out a rule book to disqualify him from the stupid skills competition? Like,
That was a tough look for the
are
NBA in
we
general.
that opposed to Chris Paul winning anything? Like,
It can't happen.
it's just I
And
mean
then and then, and then
the
they
NBA
were
itself.
they were even like shooing away the TNT reporter Ali LaForce, who was like just trying to get like the lowdown on like what happened, and the guy straight up like stiff harmed her, and I was like, what is happening? Like it's almost like in trying to make their product more accessible, the NBA is like just doing like the complete opposite, pretty much.
100%. They're kind of doing the baseball thing. Like
Yeah,
MLB's leadership has been terrible in promoting the game. It's all it does is shoot itself in the foot. And like I love Mac McClung. Okay,
here we go, here we go.
gotta back my fellow Virginian. Gate City represent. But like one, it's hilarious that Mac McClung three-peated and the Chiefs didn't. But the fact that Mac McClung is doing these dunk contests and having his Blake Griffin moment, and he's one of the greatest dunk contest performers ever. He's in the G League. Like I'm not trying to
He
knock the guy,
I I
but you
went
got to have a John Morant in dunk
yes,
contest. Like
yes,
get your superstars in these moments. Like when Donovan Mitchell was in the dunk contest as a
yeah.
rookie, that was so iconic. Vince Carter in the dunk contest was iconic, right? Like get your superstars in these events instead of having to wake up Mac McClung once a year to try and make this event worth watching. Like I love Mac. It's not a knock on Mac. It's what the league has become because these players feel like they're above these things, but like they
Yeah.
need you to step in and make this interesting because Matt, you can't be banking on Mac McClung every year. And Castle probably should have won.
Yeah, don't get me started on that. It was really fun to watch Stephon Castle as a Spurs fan this week. He got to participate in every night of the three-day weekend. So he's in the Rising Stars Friday night, then the dunk contest, then part of the All-Star game with that four-team tournament. But yeah, like I was gonna fire off this take being like, hey, if you're going to compete in the NBA All-Star game, you have to actually be an NBA player. And I went back and looked, and unfortunately, Mac McClung did play 5 minutes back in like November for the Orlando Magic. So he has played NBA minutes this year, much to my chagrin. I was really trying to bank on that one. But yeah,
He's
like it, but
he's
like
made
even then, it's like the dude's played five minutes in the NBA over the last 12 months. So like, what are we doing?
he's made three times more money from winning the dunk contest than he has in his entire G League career.
Yeah,
Like that's look, I'm not trying to knock Mac, but you got to have your stars in these moments. Like it's like if baseball had a home run derby and like Aaron Judge or Gunnar Henderson or like these face of the league type guys aren't in it. Like you're gonna pull out like that's like having a player on the Salt Lake Bees in the home run derby. It's like what are we doing here?
literally. Yeah. Well,
Like
and the
that's
and the funny
what
thing
it
is,
is.
it literally it all started here in Salt Lake at Salt Lake All-Star weekend because that was the first time Mac McClung won. And I interviewed him that morning. They had like all the setup where like you can kind of go player by player. They have different like tables and stuff. Straight up, nobody at Mac McClung's table. Nobody wanted to talk to him. And this is like 12 hours before he won the dunk contest. And I was the only one asking questions because you want to know what I asked him about? It was because Mark Pope tried to
That's
recruit him to come to BYU.
still my all-time Roman Empire. What if Mac McClung went to BYU? Because dude, Mac McClung was a huge deal like in my neck of the woods because like he committed to Georgetown. He played at a two-way school in like middle of nowhere, Virginia. So me and my friends would go, we'd be like in class and be like, yo, Mac played last night. We'd pull up his highlights
Yeah,
because we'd never seen a dude like that. Like it was, it
exactly.
was it was the Elvis scene. Like. But I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that he's in the NBA playing minutes at all is crazy. The fact that he's like the face of the dunk contest is crazy. Like, good for him. But come on, you need your Giannis's, you need your John Morants, you need your LeBrons in these events because I don't want to see a G League player winning every year. Just why would I watch that?
I saw a couple tweets from guys like John Morant, like Giannis. So hopefully this kind of like shocked them into like maybe wanting to come back. If
Like,
nothing, if nothing else, because like this G League guy who played 5 minutes in the NBA is
yeah.
like is taking all this clout and hype that could be yours like easily for the taking. It's just there.
I need to see a redeem team come back. Like, all right,
Oh,
Manu and Argentina won the gold. Like, we're not mailing it in for the Olympics anymore. We're
Yeah.
assembling the freaking Avengers.
Here we
Like
go, dude. Here we go. The MCU is in shambles. The All-Star Weekend is in shambles. It's just it's a tough time for us out here.
it's brutal out here.
Yeah. But there is hope on the horizon. Fun games here on the horizon for, like we mentioned, Big 12 hoops. Like if you're trying to get amped up for March Madness, the time is now. Like I know we're still a couple weeks technically out of March, but like this is the time to get invested in a couple of these teams, see what they're all about. And because this is where March is made, is in February, as they say.
Yeah, if you're not tuning in for, I mean, there's nothing else going on right now. Like watch
Yeah.
college basketball, get into it because it makes March Madness so much more enjoyable when you're like, oh, like Maryland won in the first round. Like that was an awesome win they had over Iowa in February
He a
to
Terp?
plug my Terps, right? He a Terp, right? Like I mean, and dude, mid-major college basketball is the best. Like people sleep. The Atlantic 10 is lit. The Mountain West is dope. Like so many awesome mid-major schools that are gonna make some noise in March. Like don't sleep on these random games that show up on like CBS Sports
Dude,
Network,
I was gonna say
USA.
they're all on TV too. Like you could just
Yeah.
roll through. There's like 10 games on at a time, but just like on Saturday, Tuesday, Thursday night, like just pop it on. You'll catch a game, I guarantee it.
Yeah, George Mason, my mid-major school from back home. They were on USA yesterday. They came back from down 16 in the second half and won by one. Top 10 defensive team in the country, great guard play. Like that's a sneaky like Elite Eight team from the Atlantic 10. Like these teams are awesome. Like there's so much good college basketball. And for how kind of in shambles the NBA appears to be and all these other things going on that just frustrating in the sports world, like college basketball is still awesome. Get on it. It's awesome that BYU and Utah are in the same league again and can play meaningful games against each other. It's awesome that Utah State continues to be this awesome program with great players and in a really fun league. Like, don't take this for granted because this is such an awesome moment for the state.
Yep, you heard it here first. We sleep in May. We'll catch you guys next time.